So a lot of talk here at E3 this year has been about VR, and a lot of developers are getting in on it. But it seems like this E3 we're learning a little bit more about sort of veteran developers getting in on the VR action. And one of those developers that's been around for a very long time is Rebellion. And this game has been around for a very long time as well, Battlezone. And now you're bringing it to Morpheus. Just tell us a little bit about. So first of all, what is this game for those who weren't around when it first was?
Well, I wasn't around either, but yeah, so in 1980, Atari released Battlezone, which was an arcade game. It was considered the first proper 3D game, and you could potentially argue it's the first VR game as well, because there were a set of goggles in the arcade unit that you have to actually physically get into. The license was owned by Atari. There were a couple of Battlezone games in the 90s as well, which were very different strategy games. But Jason and Chris, our owners, were huge Battlezone fans as kids. They went to the arcades and they formed Rebellion. You know, they were influenced by playing games in the 80s. And when Atari started selling off some of their IP a couple of years ago, they thought about VR and they thought, wow, let's get Battlezone. It'd be a sort of an honor for us as you know, to have this franchise under the Rebellion name. So, and they told one of our internal teams at Oxford, they said, guys, let's reboot Battlezone, go, you know. So there you go.
And of course, it's a lot of tank-on-tank violence that's going on here. What can you tell us about sort of the play modes and what people will experience here?
Okay, so the demo we've built for E3 is very much our first kind of vertical slice. It's to prove to ourselves that we could make a first-person VR game, because doing strafing, doing FPS kind of things are generally quite hard in VR, we discovered. We had some tips from Sony on it, we did a lot of our own research. So in terms of modes and things, this is very much going to be, well, Rebellion's strengths are definitely in single player and co-op at the moment. You think about Sniper Elite 3, Zombie Army Trilogy, really heavy focus on co-op. We haven't really confirmed yet what modes we're going to have. I'd imagine single player and co-op are probably going to be our strong points, but we're looking at other modes as well. But at the moment, this is kind of, we just wanted to get the gunplay down, the feel of the tanks, and the kind of that mix of arcade gameplay with a nice kind of retro feel to the graphics. And that was what we wanted to present at E3 and see how everyone's reacted to it. And it's been really positive so far. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah, one of the things I found is that a lot of these VR games are sort of slow-paced. But here you're turning around quickly, everything is going, and there's no motion sickness, there's not any problems of that kind, but it's really much a Twitch game in that sense.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a challenge, but I think one of the main things we learned when our designers were looking at kind of design language from 2D games, and when I say that I mean just games played on a TV, there are a lot of things you can't do in VR. So obviously that explains why some things are slower and virtual reality, and that makes sense, but we wanted to make an arcade experience anyway, and we thought we could do it. The main key is that we don't use any clever camera shake or any of the cool things that make stuff like Call of Duty or even Sniper Elite, you know, kind of cinematic. You have to get rid of all those design rules, and you have to keep the player immersed in the world and not pulled away from that by having someone else control the camera behind you. So the cockpit itself in the tank moves, but the head is generally nice and still, camera view angle. Also having a really high frame rate really helps as well for motion sickness. And generally, we've found that people who said, oh, I don't like VR games, generally have been pretty good on this. So Mark Cerny, who heads up all the tech at PlayStation, he played it. He used to work with the original Battlezone guys, so he was really excited to be here. And he tends to get sick on VR games, and he said, oh, this is, you know, it's really enjoyed that. So we think, hopefully, we've still got time, obviously, to carry on improving, but we think we've nailed the, you know, being a pretty safe game where most people can feel comfortable.
So you mentioned high frame rate. What is it that's necessary then? Is it above 60 or?
So if you're looking at it on screen, it's about 60 frames a second, but the sort of terms in virtual reality, what you want is 128 hertz reprojection, which is something Sony have targeted. You'll see it on their information outside. I'm not the technical guy on this, so I couldn't tell you the reasons for that, but that's the minimum that Sony require for this to run on virtual reality, so that, you know, it feels natural, it feels smooth, and it doesn't pull you out. If anything distracts you, pulls you out of VR, that's when you're going to start feeling maybe a little bit queasy.
So I tried it here on PS4 and Morpheus. Do you have other plans for Battlezone as well, other VR devices?
So we've confirmed Morpheus for now. We've definitely got other kits in the studio. We've been working on, we've been playing with VR kits for a while. We had a lot of backers of Oculus in the studio, but Sony gave us a lot of their latest kits in Europe. We were one of the few developers to get them before E3, and so we wanted to say thanks to them and make sure the build for E3 was ready on Morpheus and come out and say, yeah, we're coming to Morpheus. We don't know when, and we'll probably we'll talk about other VR platforms and potentially even a non-VR version, depending on how we want to publish the game. But we'll be announcing that in a future date.
So you're not targeting sort of the first wave of the launch of VR devices, or are you still hopeful you might hit that?
We're hopeful, but there's no date yet. I mean, Sony have said to us it's first half 2016, but you can't.
Pretty broad window.
Broad, yeah, and they want to shore up their plans, and they'll keep in touch and let us know. And obviously, it'd be amazing to come out with the launch, but we'll just have to see how the game progresses. We've got something really fun now, but now we've got to build, a load of content in it to make it good value.
Right. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, good. Nice to meet you.